Well, good morning, everybody. I've got a lot packed into your Monday morning forecast video here today. After we talk about the cold front that's coming across the country and the chances of rain along that front, especially across some of our dry areas, we're going to look out there to see what's brewing in the tropics. We'll then transition into the upcoming 2-week precipitation pattern, which is going to favor some tropical interactivity, but not from the Atlantic, but from the East Pacific. I then want to show you how the global momentum is coming up. That's a big shift and something we've not seen move very much at all for the last almost 60 days. And what that's going to mean for the rest of the month, we'll get in there and dig into that. Then I want to talk to you about what's happening with the new long-range data that was just released yesterday. The new European model is full-on La Niña-like, and that is a very wet pattern according to the model for most of the country going into winter. We'll get into that. I'm going to finish with you on some model battle happening over South America. So that's where we're going to go. All right, you've been staring at a map looking at the snow analysis for the last 72 hours of the weekend snows, and we packed it in part of the Rockies. And I'll tell you something. The longer range forecast is keeping the Rocky Mountains in that area I just kind of circled quite snowy this winter. Now, it's early October. I can't make a slam dunk forecast about that just yet, but I want you to know that it is being watched carefully as a possible result of the pattern as it comes through. Now, what made this all possible was the cold front that came into this area. All right, so you can see the winds yesterday. These are yesterday's winds diving through here, putting the front about right in this area. There was a halfway decent pull on some moisture that was spinning around this low, and as a result, I'll show you the rainfall in just a few moments. But out ahead of it, these very, very strong winds out of the south were actually hitting some dry land. And of course, during harvest, we did see several field fires that showed up. We could even see some of them from satellite. Now, where this is going to go in terms of the precipitation pattern is how far this front sags to the south, what it does to parts of Kentucky and Tennessee. Does it leapfrog over Illinois, Missouri, and Indiana? And how much rain does it bring into the Northeast, which over the weekend just sat under high pressure? We are then going to talk about tropical systems and what their influence could be if they make the turn, something like this. And this next wave coming here across, the Atlantic, what's its chance at getting over to the United States? We have all of that kind of ahead of us, but let's get in there and look at some of the satellite data from yesterday afternoon. Now, where I was in Champaign, we could see some of the wildfire smoke from some of these field fires, and they may not look as impressive, I know, as what you may see from other locations, but these were devastating fires. We had 15 fire departments on one of these inside Champaign County just yesterday on Sunday, and this has been an area that has gone extremely dry over the last 60 days, and we are hoping so badly that this front can squeeze through here and deliver some rainfall just to ease that threat. Now, this was yesterday afternoon in this area. I want to point out one other thing about yesterday real quick before we see where this front's going to go, and that's back into Washington State, because after several days, it felt like, of just clouds and rain throughout this region. I know it didn't get into the Columbia Basin as much. I was curious if that fire was still burning, and some of the cleared out air yesterday does show more wildfire smoke from the fire here. This one, of course, on the leeward side of the Cascade Mountains. We're going to continue to watch for that as well. But that front's pretty potent, and if you look at the 24-hour temperature change, this is where the frontal boundary is now. We're in some places, up to 35 degrees cooler than we were yesterday at this time. We've known about this front. We've been watching it. We knew the cooling chances behind it, where the frost threat was going to be. But for many, this is the first decent taste of fall weather we've seen in a long time. Now, we do have the National Weather Service has put out these freeze watches, freeze warnings, and frost advisories across a big section here of the northern plains, getting back into Wyoming, and then dotting throughout the Pacific Northwest, where the colder air is kind of entrenched this morning. But as we watch the rainfall from this is just a radar animation starting last night looking at that front. And what many of us are concerning ourselves with is how aggressively does this front lift air, and is there enough moisture in it to be lifted across these very, very dry regions here to then, put down some rainfall, to at least knock down the dust in some of these extremely dry areas. And where does this front end up in the northeast? Now, you know that over the weekend we had a 10% chance, I think we covered it on Friday, of getting some tropical development here. You can see those tropical showers coming through Florida, and then there's a brief but very, very weak little spin up right here that's coming into New Orleans this morning. We watched it over the weekend. Just come right there. It's right there. It's kind of tropical in origin, but not anywhere close enough to be strong to develop anything. I don't have anything coming out of the Gulf this next week either, so it's going to be another week of just wondering if the Gulf is going to produce anything, and we'll be talking about it all week long. But over the last 72 hours, there's our rainfall through a little after 5 a.m. this morning. So very wet into this corridor. We know that a lot of this was snow, and then we're seeing where that frontal boundary has brought in its moisture, plus the surge of tropical-like thunderstorms that have come across parts of Florida into southern Georgia, but right along the Gulf Coast as well. All right, from here, let me just put this into perspective. I keep talking about how dry things are in places. This is what the last week looked like in terms of total accumulated precipitation. Again, the benefits of the outside of Imelda breaking away from the drought situation in the Carolinas here. Very wet here, which we just saw on radar. This is what it looks like when you go back over the last 2 weeks. And one of the reasons why all that red faded was because, remember, about 2 weeks ago, we had that low that just slowly moved its way through here, breaking the drought for this quadrant. Now, I say breaking the drought, it slowed the drought, put a dent in the drought. Many locations, of course, were missed by this. And if you go back even farther, this is back now 30 days, we start to see these holes. And this is where we've watched our drought monitor expand things, right? So we have this corridor, we have that corridor, and we have this region around the Four Corner states. And we also were watching this part of Washington and northern Montana. All right, those are our dry spots. Now, I've been making the case something needs to come from here north, I think, to break this, or a big front that comes through, or a bypassing tropical system here, or again, just another front to squeeze in the moisture, squeeze out the moisture, I should say, through this area. There has to be a breakdown of the massive ridge that's just kept this whole region drier. I do think there is something cooking here, though. We've been talking about it, right? There's this potential for a tropical system to come through and hit parts of the Four Corner states, parts of the Colorado River Basin. We're going to keep an eye out on all of that, because when we look back at the beginning of August when this dry pattern began and then say, what did it do from August until yesterday? I mean, look at that. That's August 1st, and there it is. I mean, we've seen better moisture in the west, but not in the Four Corner states, certainly not into Texas or the Red River. The Mississippi, we've been covering that extensively, but look around the Great Lakes Basin, the Northeast, the Mississippi and Missouri Basin. It's really only been like this corridor that has maintained its wetter conditions. Everywhere else has been quite dry. And I'm going to show it to you again. I'm going to keep showing you this until it breaks. This is the August 1st to October 5th precipitation ranks by climate district. And there are numerous climate districts in here that are having their driest such time period. So that's all of August, all of September, and the first 5 days of October included. And that corridor is our driest compared to historical averages. That's why we see our drought monitor now at 70% coverage across the country. So are we going to get in there? High-res NAM, okay, this is through this morning. Okay, there's better rains for parts of eastern Nebraska and Iowa. And we're going to watch Kentucky and Tennessee here very carefully, because what you've got here is what was left of that tropical system. Now, why is that so important? There's moisture from that tropical surge, I don't know what to call it, but this pulse of tropical moisture getting into this region, and that front is going to hit it. So as we go forward, does it leapfrog over, look at this, Missouri, Illinois, Indiana, and Michigan as the front, by this afternoon is sitting here? What we end up getting is a look like this. And this is kind of a broken line. And there's an area in through here that I'm concerned is not going to be able to see the widespread decent rains. There'll be rain that gets all across that arrow that I just drew. But is it enough? And the front goes through. Now look, see this right here? This is where we get into this part like around Paducah, just as an example, the Boot Heel of Missouri, the Ohio River, where that front is able to squeeze out tropical moisture from this past weekend that went over Florida, then this morning over Louisiana, and then here. And then it gets the extra lift from the front that goes right into that corridor. And now this front has a much better chance of using moisture that all weekend came around the high pressure that was now drifting offshore. And as it comes in here and the front slides through, we're going to lift that air and give it a better chance at bringing in some rain into the northeast. But overall, as I look at it, this is what concerns me. That little corridor, that's not little, it's huge, is expected just to stay drier over the next 7 days. While this system plus the front is hitting this region, providing a lot more rainfall, and you just saw it was coming through the northeast. I'll come back to this in just a few minutes, what's offshore here in the Carolinas. But that's your next 7 days of total accumulated precipitation according to the WPC. Now, I want to just break away from that thought process for a moment just to ask what's going on in the tropics. And we know we're watching a system that could be developing out here, but my comments last weekend seem to have held true with the weekend model trends. And that is whatever this feature is, you'll see it restart here in a moment. The likelihood of it having to curl around that high, look at this, just turning in this direction, maybe getting pushed out by other features, it's relatively high, okay, that it's not going to hit the United States. There is something here we need to keep an eye on, though. And you start to see some more activity in Central America, the Central American gyre. But my question is that activity here, or does it live over on this side of Mexico, the western side of Mexico? Because that is where we start to see our models attempting to build tropical systems and send them toward the Baja and possibly send them into the southwestern United States. Like, that's the thought process. And there's another piece of the atmosphere that's attempting to help this, and it's this feature right here, that trough. Now, I don't know how many of you that are listening this morning listened to me at the end of last week, but I had mentioned that we're getting too much meridional flow out of this pattern, right? Do you remember that, the omega look to the pattern? And here it is, by the way, if you want to see what that Greek letter omega looks like in this case, it's kind of a weird one, but there it is. That tends to drive any any low pressure center here to, rather than just going across the country, it tends to peel it back. And what happens is if we peel one of those back and they sit and spin here while a tropical system comes up, guess what? The flow around it will take that tropical system into the southwestern United States. That's the thinking as we look through this pattern. So you watch right here, okay? That's the trough we're talking about. European model sweeps it through this part of Alaska, then into British Columbia. And did you notice one piece of it breaks off here, but the bulk of that low, look, there it is, there's your omega. The bulk of that low slides along the west coast. Now, I'll show you what that does for precip along the west coast in a second. But the broader synoptic scale flow around the mesoscale flow of this low will likely bring it into shore. And we're going to see where the rainfall is going to be from that. And by the way, where are we in time? This is Friday. So as we go forward, hey, there is something a little different around October 12th and 13th. And what I'm looking at is this versus this. Now, that's a nice big open wave. This one's cut off. But the two attempt to interact and move. And at the same time, there's this. Now, I need to come over to the East Coast for a second. Look at that. A pair of vorticity maximums on this upcoming Sunday. Now, what these two things are, let's go back here, is there's a trough sneaking through here that's going to grab some tropical momentum with it. That's down at the low levels. There's a trough sneaking over the Great Lakes. And these two things spin up and they do that Fujiwara. See it? See how they spin around one another? And that could be critical late in the week and over the weekend for the East Coast rainfall. I'm looking right here. All right, that's just 1 week out. Let's see what this ends up doing. Compare the GFS to the European because they do have a different solution on this. Playing forward, this is getting us through Tuesday now. So you see the front by Tuesday morning. Best rains here. I think it's going to be skipping over this particular corridor. We then get this, now not completely, but skipping over it in some regard. We then watch the front move through the coast, and now our attention goes west. There's the cutoff low, see it? And there's the would-be tropical system we're going to be keeping an eye on here, all right? Now, that tropical system, all right, in the European model, because of how much farther and deeper this low is versus how much farther to the north and shallow that low is, it's all about separation. This one's going to have a much greater influence at pulling this moisture in. And take a look at the moisture plume there. There's something going over the Four Corner States, but it's not connected to this tropical system. So we keep playing it forward. And if you go, this is Friday into Saturday and Sunday. You've got, well, you can see it. See the differences in the models? Now, at the same time, the European solution on that pair of waves over in the east, this is now Saturday. Look at the interactivity between this, bringing this moisture much farther inland by Sunday morning. GFS has it, it's just farther offshore. What's the GFS doing? It's taking a much stronger northerly wave through Canada, dumping a bunch of snow here, versus the European, which dumps it all here in the Rocky Mountains, And then we get out here into next week, next Monday, Tuesday, and we're just waiting to see if that full push through the country's biggest ridge I've seen in a long time that's lived here is going to get knocked out. All right, that was a lot of moving pieces. Let's kind of break it down. First of all, here's snow. Over the next 7 days, this is the European model. That's the GFS. Now remember, the GFS was more aggressive with that late storm system here, dumping a bunch of snow. This is mostly north of Highway 16. So there it is. We are getting more Rocky Mountain snow. Total precipitation, though, let's see. Look at that. Look at this extra moisture. There's some places down here picking up more than 3 inches of rainfall just by Tuesday night. And this is our drought. This is one of our drought areas. But the leapfrog region was right in through here. We go past this into Thursday, Friday, Saturday. Look. There's your cutoff low. There's your surge of tropical moisture, and it's already getting in here by Saturday. So let's now go beyond that into Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday. And I'm just going to take you out a full 10 days in the European model. My eye continues to be drawn toward this region, which is just missing out a lot of this precipitation. We will need to watch this carefully. I do not believe the current model solution is right in the European. It's probably going to adjust. We expect that. But that could be huge for how much rainfall comes into the southeast coast and up the mid-Atlantic. Right? I mean, if all this shifts west and you're bringing that in, that's a lot of moisture. How much is coming into the west? Well, we looked at the snow, but there's some decent precipitation coming into the northwest in this pattern. So let's go have a look now at some probabilities. Who's driest? Well, there it is again. You can also see this part of the northern plains. And the big question is, does that little stream of moisture sneak right in through here? And does it get into Southern California? It doesn't look like it. That's your next 10 days staying under 1/10 of an inch. If I go up to 1/2 inch, yep, new model run is in. There you go. That's the probability of the next 10 days it's staying under 1/2 inch. And who's wettest? Well, there you are. Here, and this. So let's keep an eye on those features as we go forward, and knowing that we're going to likely see a lot of model changes happening for the East Coast pair of upper level vortexes and what they're going to do beyond this. So I'm curious, does this next wave, this guy right here on Saturday, get through? And it tries so hard by next Monday to break through this ridge. But does it fully make it? Not really. It's doing something different, but it's not just this full trough. I mean, I don't know. Is the European model really seeing this? What am I looking at? Sorry. Ridge, trough. I mean, it's interesting that by October 18th it's found it, but it's not the trough that came through like this and then dug and then exited. That's like I'm wish casting my way toward winter. This just seems to be kind of pinched off between 1, 2, and 3 ridges, and so it's kind of just a result of that pattern. I'm showing it to you though because I'm trying to understand these week 2 forecasts. You do notice that, like the CPC has suggested, there's a wetter corridor in through here. Now, some of this, of course, being that tropical, event, but I'm just concerned about how long this sticks around. So you're saying, well, why do you keep talking about trough? Because if you bring in a trough like this, you will open up the Gulf. We'll have storms, but it'll rain down in these really dry areas that are down south, all the way up to where I am in Illinois, which needs to rain too. So I'm kind of patiently waiting for something like that to take shape. Now, the longer range models, and this is kind of alluding back to the first statement I made, the new mid-October to mid-November is suggesting we're going to try to get there. Do you notice how this is nowhere near as dry as it has been forecast? Like it's starting to fade, and this whole region has gone over toward normal. The kind of things we're thinking with this particular pattern from now to mid-November is that we're going to come out of the basement with our global angular momentum. Now, you know that since August, I've been telling you the pattern just lost it. We built ourselves into big circumglobal ridges. I kept showing them, right? And we knew the Bermuda High drifted. We lost all this momentum. The question is, does it make this turn and come back up now that we're in the month of October? If we go to Victor Cassini's page, looking at the global, look here it is, global relative atmospheric angular momentum, we've been in the basement. We're expected to stay there a little longer, but look, all of the CFSV2 members are trying by the end of October to revive that, to bring it up. And the global wind oscillation, which is just another way we look at this, just here's a real simple way to look at this diagram when you're looking at the GWO. If you're down here in these phases, we're looking at circumglobal ridging. So this is meridional north-south flow. When it starts to work its way back up, which is what it's doing over the next 2 to 3 weeks, you're now breaking those ridges down, opening the pattern, getting rid of the blocks, and the thing just starts to move. It starts to go. And what we're really, I'm thinking, might be a major component to this, is as Matt talked about last week, we've built in some good snow here. In fact, compared to average, we've got more snow throughout parts of Russia than normal. And why that's so important is that's redefining the poleward temperature gradient. You see, if you want big, strong, dominant jet stream that brings in routine weather systems, have a strong equator to poleward temperature gradient. And that's creating it. And that is why we look and see the winds. Look at this. See, here's Russia. Look at how strong the winds are between the heat that's to the south and now the snow-packed cold air to the north. And we just need to know, does this come across and just drive systems, or does it block itself up somewhere in the Gulf of Alaska or along the west coast? But momentum is returning to the pattern. Now, with momentum returning to the pattern in the in the upper atmosphere, it's going to affect the low-level winds too. And as you note here, just playing this forward in the GFS model, we're starting to see these increased chances of getting stronger and stronger winds in several different places along the west coast, in the interior of the country, and because of the dance of those two vortexes, possibly some very strong winds offshore. So all of this is going to start to blend together, and we're going to call it a seasonal change, right? It's just, this is fall. That's what we typically get. Now, I haven't even talked about temperatures since the beginning, but here's your frost threat over the next 7 days. Take a look at these highs. Here's today's highs. So just a huge swing in temperatures here over the end of last week. That's Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Look at the warmth coming back. So a nice little 30-degree warm up here after the cool down. The east stays cooler. The west has the cutoff low sitting off the corner. And there it is. That's how things transition this week. So a drop and then a rebound. And we want to know how long it's going to last. Now, right now, I'll trust these models out 5 days, even out to 10 days. But you should expect over the next few weeks that the day 10 through day 15 forecasts, even in these ensembles, are going to change a lot. So, for example, if the ECMWF does in fact drop a deeper trough of low pressure here and colder air aloft, yeah, this is wrong. It's not going to be warm. We're going to cool the Great Lakes off. And that's a possibility. All right. So where does this land us? What are these last tabs? Well, we have been monitoring the change in ocean temperature in the Gulf of Alaska. See how hot it was back in August? Now look here. At the end of August, getting into September, and now into October. Look, see that cool down? All the while, La Niña's been brewing here. And that effect is starting to just increase our trade winds. So these cooler colors are representing stronger and stronger surges of easterly wind bursts, which is what we call La Niña. It's across the tropical, Pacific, and there it goes. Now, what I'm thinking here is very much in line with the European model solution. Last month, the European model predicted that the forecast would drop down here at the ensemble average, about averaging 0.8 degrees C below normal. That's a weak La Niña. And their newest forecast is very similar. And I go, whoa, that just dropped. No, just the y-axis changed. So see, the previous y-axis went down to -2. Why did it have to change? Well, the newest solution is dropping it down, same level, but then rapidly changing this to, by March, warmer than normal SSTs, sea surface temperatures in the equatorial Pacific. Now you're going, all right, tell me. Well, this is a brief, weak La Niña. And that transition, in order to do this, means we're going to be shifting momentum out of the tropics back to the northern hemisphere and to the southern. It's just going to change. It's going to go from the tropics to the poles. That's what typically happens when you make this transition. Now, can you get stuck in between while the transition happens? Yes, there is some concern about this for 2026, but I can't define it fully yet. All I can do is show you this. By December, I want to know is, as this La Niña peaks out, do we lose momentum? Because remember, so you're going to lose it first before you gain it. Do we lose it here to build up two more sizable areas of high pressure, especially in these two areas? Now you're saying, why? Why does that matter? It matters because of what it'll do to the jet stream. And if you have a look, this is October, November, December. Remember that pressure map I just showed you was in December. But if you go to November, December, January, and December, January, February, this is what I'm saying. Look at the entirety of the West Coast going over wetter, the Ohio Valley going wetter. And the dry signals we saw for Texas or the Southeast are not nearly as strong. This model just trended wetter for Australia, Indonesia. It's also trended wetter here and significantly drier into Argentina. All of these major stories going into the winter of 2025 for the Northern Hemisphere and the heart of the growing season in Argentina. Now, I do want to just come in a little closer. Oops, sorry about that. I need to go over here first. Let's just look at the United States. There it is. That's the new December, January, February. Look at this, January, February, March. The models even come off of this dry risk here, and it's not even that dry in Florida, but it just expanded these wet areas. And this is just suggesting to me to tell you, hey, get ready for just a pretty active winter. I think it's looking very active if the model has a clue. But I told you at the beginning, it's bit fully into La Niña. Now, you saw a moment ago, let's just go down to it really quickly, that the model is not trying to revive rainfall here, and we've got to watch this carefully. Yeah, Brazil gets it, but if this manifests itself and really happens, this could hit Argentina hard and southern Brazil hard. And when you look at variations in Brazil's total yield, they often don't come from the north, they come from the south. That's much more susceptible to weather variance than the north is. So speaking of the north, we got the new data in. Let's go, whoops, I already opened it here. This is their newest update. They're at 15% planted. I told you they'd stay along that top. But the question is, this is the rainfall that came through over the weekend. Most of it was down south. Watch it again play here. Another front that snuck in here. Very, very limited monsoonal storms to the north. My commentary last week was they were going to take advantage of this drier week to rapidly plant while the fronts snuck through the south. That's what your last week's worth of rainfall looked like. Now the question is, does that drier weather end? The next 7 days from the European model says, hey, we're going to stick around with drier. We're going to be drier into Argentina. But then you get out there through day 10, and the rain starts to come back up in this area. And they are banking on the European model being right for week 2. Above average precipitation. Our drier areas are the corners, but wetter than normal in through here. Now, that stands in stark contrast to the GFS. That's the GFS 7-day. This is the GFS 10-day. Remember how the European had already brought rainfall in here? Look at the GFS week 2. It's only wetter down here in this corner, near Sao Paulo, for example, bringing in rainfall. It's significantly drier in this area, making the 2-week forecast, if I can get you out here and show it to you, very dry here. And the GFS has been the drier, biased model all season long. If you go have a look at it, that's the GFS extended forecast on November 9th. It is not calling for anything to get in here, and it keeps these states here wetter than average. But it's dry into Argentina too. Now watch, that's the GFS solution. This is the European. What a complete opposite in the forecast. You're saying, well, which is right? I'm only going to tell you up to this point, the European has been more right in this area than the GFS has. All right. Okay, now you've seen my setup for the week. Matt will pick this up tomorrow morning, and we'll just keep rolling with it, trying to figure out where it's going to go next. Thanks for your patience and time this morning. We'll just chat tomorrow. Thanks.